Welcome. This is part 3 on my series on the Photo Pro app for the Xperia 1 Mark II and the Xperia 5 Mark II. In the first two parts I cover basics such as the different modes you can choose from, how to actually take a photo, and shooting in RAW. In this video I'm going to go deeper into a couple of things such as the focus modes, the metering modes, as well as the white balance settings. So let's dive right in. Alright, first let's talk about focus modes. So if I bring the camera up here, you'll see that it immediately detects the elephant on the right. And what's happening here is down here in the detection settings, face and IAF is on. So it's immediately detecting any sort of face or eyes in the scene, putting a box around it, and if I take the image, it's going to focus on that subject. Now if I want to turn this off, I can just go in here and turn face detect off, and now we don't see that box anymore. And now it's just going to focus on whatever it thinks is the most important in the scene. So it's on the elephant, but if I go to the left here, it's going to find the box on the left and just kind of jump around depending on what it thinks is important in the scene. Now in some cases I may want to point it in a specific direction, and I can just tap the screen on that subject. So here I have it tapped on the elephant, I can tap on the box, have it focus there, and that works fine. Now something else that we can change is down here in the focus area. Right now it's set to wide, which means it's going to scan the whole scene to see what to focus on. But I can change that to center to make it a little more simple. So now we have a point right in the center, and wherever I point that and press halfway, it's going to focus on that item. So simplifies it a little bit, and I can still tap on the screen to move it around. Like there I've tapped on the box, I can tap on the elephant and go wherever I want in terms of the focus. Now one thing you might have noticed is when I tap on the elephant here, you can see that the background is kind of dark, but when I tap on the box, everything's kind of brightening up a little bit. Now to see what's happening here, if we go into the menu, we can go down into focus, and you can see that the focus mode is set to single shot AF, right? But then we go into setup, you can see touch to adjust is set to focus and brightness. And we can change this to just be autofocus, or we can make it focus and brightness. Now what this means is if we go back into the screen, when I touch a subject to focus on, it's also setting the brightness based on that point. So right now, the elephant is pretty bright, but the box is pretty dark. So when I tap on the box, the phone knows that it needs to brighten up the exposure a little bit to get the box properly exposed. Pretty much get the brightness, to be appropriate for that subject. Now if we go into the menu and I go into setup and I make this just autofocus, which would just be tap to focus. Now when I tap to focus on the box, you can see it's not getting brighter anymore. It's keeping it pretty much the same across the elephant and the box. And so this is something that you may need to change and tweak depending on how you shoot, but it's worth keeping in mind that you can tweak this. Alright, next let's talk about metering modes. Now metering modes are simply just how the camera judges how bright to make the image. And by default it's set to multi, you can see here in the metering modes. And this is a really good default which tries to make the overall image reasonably bright. But we can change it. So let's try to put it on center here. And you can see that the image got dark. And what's happening here is that the phone has decided to make the center well exposed and doesn't really care about the area around the center. Now this might be useful in cases where you are just trying to get something in specific exposed. So let's say you're taking a photo of let's say a bird, for instance. You would want the bird itself to be reasonably exposed, and you may not care about the area around the bird. But you can see here, the area around here has gotten dark, and so if we want to get that back to reasonable brightness, we can go back to multi. Now there's a third option too, which is spot, which is even more exact and on the center than center weighted is. So pretty much as you go right, it becomes more narrow of an area, and if you go left, it becomes kind of more general of the overall image. And multi is a really good default for most things that you would shoot. So last is white balance. Now by default, your phone's going to be set to auto white balance down here. And what this is doing is trying to judge, what is white in the image that you're taking. And it's essentially trying to figure out what kind of lighting you're using in the scene. Do you have white lights? Do you have yellow lights? Are you in the sun? And most of the time, it's going to do a decent job, but if you're really trying to get a really exact image, you're going to want to change it. So even in this scene here that I have, the light is not totally right here. This auto white balance is making the scene a little too cool, a little too white. And so what I would do is I would actually change this to daylight. And by changing it to daylight, you can see that it got a little warmer in the back here. And this is a lot more accurate to how this actually looks in real life. Now, a cool feature of Photo Pro is that in addition to these default white balance settings we have here, like fluorescent, incandescent, and daylight that I'm using, we can actually set custom values. So if we go down here to, let's say, custom 2 and go to set, we can actually configure our own white balance based on this patch that's in the center of the frame. And to do this is really simple. We can take something that we know is white, like this box here. We can see that the white is clearly inside the patch, so we hit set, and there we go. We have a custom white balance now. So we just hit done, and we can remove this box now. And if we go back into white balance, you can see that the custom 2 looks pretty good. If we go to daylight, which is what this scene is set as, it's pretty much the exact same. And if we want to tweak this further, we can go into adjust here, and we have a full color scale here that we can move the pointer on to really get the exact look that we want. So feel free to play with that, but in most cases, I don't think it's going to be necessary. Well, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, don't forget to like this video, and let me know in the comments below what you thought. And what would you like to see me cover next with these tutorials? I do have one planned with the Filmic Pro and Cinema Pro comparison, so keep an eye out for that. I also recently got this, the iPhone 12 Pro, and I'll be doing some comparisons with the Xperia phones. So if you're not already subscribed, now's a good time. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.